much less likely that we would actually have officers from, in this case, the GU, the Russian military intelligence, being able to come on, false documents, but nonetheless not massively sort of complex legends, in other words, fake identities, to carry out this kind of an attack. We heard from Ken McCallum, the director of MI5, recently, when he pointed out that increasingly, actually, what the Russians are doing are using proxies. So whether they're hiring gangsters or they're using people who are local but have similar political sympathies and such like. So I think we could see something like this happen in the future, particularly because the Russians quite like using poison simply because of the political theater it creates. Remember, this is not just simply about killing individuals; it's also about trying to intimidate a whole society. But on the other hand, I think it would be done in different ways. It will be done by proxies who are likely to be even less effective and efficient than the two individuals whom we very quickly ended up identifying.
A perfume bottle, I should begin with, used in the Salisbury poisonings, had enough nerve agent in it to kill thousands of people. The public inquiry into the death of Dawn Sturges, who put military-grade novichok onto her skin thinking it was perfume, started today. 4 months before the incident, two Russian men posing as tourists had used the weapon to target double agent Sergei Skripal, who collapsed on a bench outside Salisbury Cathedral alongside his daughter Yulia in March 2018. Mark Galeotti is a political scientist, historian and expert in modern Russia and joins me now. Mark, good evening.
Hello there.
This is bringing back, of course, the case of the Salisbury poisonings and, sadly, the fate of Dawn Sturges, who was kind of an innocent bystander in the whole thing. The inquiry is going to really look at the response of British police and security authorities. And they're going to look at really whether those bodies should have been more effective, should have been better at what they were doing. What do you think we might hear? What are the concerns?
Well, I mean, the problem is obviously that all of these inquiries will be able to identify things that could have been done differently. That's always the case. I mean, I'm not in any way trying to make light of it, but one has to realize that you cannot have perfect protection at all times. And therefore, I think, yes, we are going to see a lot more of the detailed information coming from the intelligence community. I mean, this is one of the reasons why this particular inquiry is framed the way it is precisely so that more intelligence materials can come out. We will find more about the police. But, I mean, unfortunately, one has to say, this was 6 years ago. And in any case, a lot has been changed. A lot has changed in those 6 years, and certainly, we've already seen that the security service and the police are now much more geared up to watching Russians, suspicious, dodgy Russians, than they were before. So my concern is that there's going to be a lot of time and effort expended in really just identifying what happened, in a snapshot of time 6 years ago.
This story, at the time and now possibly even more so, feels like something, out of a spy novel, out of an old Cold War novel. And I wonder whether, based on your understanding, kind of this sort of, age-old, poisoning someone's a pretty Cold War style act to undertake. And I wonder whether it's still possible now to carry out an operation like this, or is our surveillance, is how our intelligence services work, does that make something like this incredibly rare nowadays or nigh on impossible?
Well, look, it is rare. Whether it's impossible, that's very hard to say. What I do think, though, is that it's much less likely that we would actually have officers from, in this case, the GU, the Russian military intelligence, being able to come on, false documents, but nonetheless not massively sort of complex legends, in other words, fake identities, to carry out this kind of an attack. We heard from Ken McCallum, the director of MI5, recently, when he pointed out that increasingly, actually, what the Russians are doing are using proxies. So whether they're hiring gangsters or they're using people who are local but have similar political sympathies and such like. So I think we could see something like this happen in the future, particularly because the Russians quite like using poison simply because of the political theater it creates. Remember, this is not just simply about killing individuals; it's also about trying to intimidate a whole society. But on the other hand, I think it would be done in different ways. It will be done by proxies are likely to be even less effective and efficient than the two individuals whom we very quickly ended up identifying.
Do you think that Sergei Skripal, the Russian defector, do you think he should have been better protected? There should have been more eyes on him.
Again, it's very hard for us to say until after this inquiry precisely what was the level of protection. I mean, he clearly had a personal protection officer. He clearly had various other sort of forms of protection in line. The thing is, though, that one of the things that I think has to come out is this. There is an unspoken etiquette that, on the whole, defectors are safe because you don't want then your defectors also to be targeted, assuming that they're out of the game. And I think what seems to have been the case is that the Russians, rightly or wrongly, believed that Skripal was still involved in actively supporting Western intelligence agencies. Now, if that was the case, then frankly, yes, he absolutely should have had much, much more protection than if he was just some other defector whose time in the spook world was over.
Look, Mark, really good to speak to you. Appreciate we'll get much more information as this inquiry goes on, but I can hear your frustration with the fact that it was, 6 years ago, and where does that learning take us right now? I guess we'll have to see during the course of the inquiry. Mark Galeotti, thank you for being with us. You can read Mark's latest work, Downfall. It's a book on Yevgeny Prigozhin, the Wagner Group, and the new fight for the future of Russia, and that's out now. We've been reminding ourselves there of the 2018 poisoning of Dawn Sturgis, caught up in the Salisbury poisonings, of course. She took that perfume bottle and applied it to her skin. It was given to her as a gift by her partner, and sadly she died. Loads to come here on the show this evening. We are going to reconvene our US election watchers. Sarah Elliott, spokesperson for Republicans overseas, is with us. Molly Ball from the Wall Street Journal. And our big guest today, Scott Galloway, who's a marketing professor at New York University, co-host of the tech and politics podcast Pivot, and a big Democrat voice, actually. Scott's really well known in the States. You may even have seen him speak over here in the UK. He's a big brain, and we'll find out what he's got to say of what he makes of the Democrat campaign so far and beyond. This is Kate Borsay and the Evening Edition. Let's get a news update now from Rachel Jewell.